Welcome to part 2 of my fantasy and sci-fi story hooks series. In case you're just coming along, last week we covered various story hooks that you can use for your own stories. Why am I giving these away? Well, the truth is I have more story ideas than I'm ever going to use, and I'd much rather see those ideas inspire others to get into that magical business of crafting their own tales. So, last time we did the hero's journey. This week, it's good old-fashioned revenge. Let's talk about it. Before we get into that, though, here's a reminder to check out dcferguson.com for all my latest videos, overviews of my books, exclusive behind-the-scenes content for each of my series, and you can sign up for my newsletter. I should also mention that you can help me out in a huge way if you'll like and subscribe this video, and share it with any friends that might also enjoy the art of storytelling. Revenge stories are an interesting bunch because our main character, sometimes even our villain, is riding a morally gray line where they're one step to the left and they're doling out justice, and one step to the right makes them equally as bad as the evil that they're pursuing. The real challenge in storytelling like this is to keep your audience with you. If your hero is the one demanding justice, they must do it in a way that keeps them sympathetic, and if your villain is doing it, they need to be over that line to the point that their actions can't be justified. To add another layer of complexity to it, if you're doing a redemption arc, which is one of the types we're going to be talking about today, the revenge has to be justified but taken too far, so that we can bring the character back home. It's a juggling act, to be certain, but fear not. I'm not the type to just hand you prompts and not explain how to use them. The master of Kung Fu and friendship is far too mouthy for that. So let's start today with our first trope in the revenge genre, that of the survivor. The survivor is probably the one revenge archetype that we're most familiar with. Our character, or team, has been wronged by losing family, a friend, or even their entire homeworld. The people responsible must pay for that misdeed, one by one. So, in here, we have stories you're likely to be very familiar with. We have good old Hamlet, we also have the Count of Monte Cristo, and we have Old Boy. As with all revenge stories, at least the good ones that spend time on characterization, we're going to be exploring a universal truth. Revenge doesn't satisfy. In most cases, it costs even more of the person seeking revenge. It's all-consuming. In Hamlet, it cost him not only the life of the person he wanted to see brought to justice, but also almost everyone else around him. Of the 11 main characters, it's easier to say that Horatio and Fortinbras survive, and that's it. With the Count of Monte Cristo, Edmond Dantes is actually too successful at his revenge, and it is so complete that it goes beyond what he intended. Old Boy, like Hamlet, leaves such a number of bodies and lives ruined in its wake that the world may have been better off had this revenge never happened at all. That's the key with good revenge stories. They focus on the hollowness of victory, how getting justice doesn't mean getting closure. Revenge can't give you back what was taken, whether that's a loved one, a relationship, or even lost time. Just because we can understand the motivations of the character and would likely even do the same thing ourselves if given the opportunity, doesn't make revenge a good thing. In fact, the whole point of stories in the genre reinforces that revenge is hollow. We still do it anyway. There's a really interesting universal truth there to explore. So, let's get started with some prompts. The wizard took everything from me. My life, my home, my very face. I will build myself back from nothing to make sure he pays. The last survivor of a failed colony on Mars, they return to Earth and find themselves caught in a conspiracy that doomed their mission. We were sent on a mission we were never supposed to come back from. We weren't chosen by our king for our greatness. We were bait. See these prompts? Make them your own. That's the key. It's not important that you use them verbatim, only that it gets your mind moving in a direction. We want to start making connections. If the survivor came back from Mars, then they're an astronaut. Maybe that's too plain. What if it happened in deep space 200 years from now, in a world you created? Yes, that's what these are here for. Get those juices flowing. Now, we're going to talk about a very similar revenge story, but the message it conveys is always very different. The Caper is always about swindling the swindlers. Our main character or characters are a group of outlaws with a heart of gold, going after the exact same type of people that they are, but those guys are the bad guys. Capers are big on style, featuring the so-called bad guys versus the really bad guys. There are tight-knit crews of specialists, typically a very charismatic lead, and the revenge is usually bombastic and loaded with irony. For these, we're talking about your Ocean's 11, Now You See Me, and The Italian Job. When you're watching these films, the cops are usually one step behind all these protagonists, while their goals are so lofty and they are so talented that they'll never be caught and their revenge will be sweet and complete. If I'm being honest, I don't really think these stories speak to a universal truth in any way that's different from the others. In fact, it usually lacks depth and nuance, trading that in for style and laughs. In that regard, capers are usually more like junk food. That's not to say that that's a bad thing. Sometimes all I ever want for my entertainment is to turn my brain off and just enjoy something for what it is. To that end, Ocean's 11, Now You See Me, and The Italian Job are all really enjoyable, well-acted films with some really memorable characters and fun stories. So, consider my comment more of a warning to set your expectations. If you're looking to make a fun story dripping with style, capers are for you. If you want to write a deep story with metaphor and message, you're probably better off elsewhere. The Count of Monte Cristo is considered a literary masterpiece. Gone in 60 Seconds is a popcorn action film. Sometimes I'm really craving popcorn. So, what are some story hooks in this space? In life, he was a loose end his boss needed to tie up. As a ghost, he may be an even bigger problem. After a whistleblower dies smuggling a biotech secret in their blood, their remaining friends team up to take down the corporate giant. He sold out his own team to gain the king's favor. Now the team will need to break out of jail and into noble society to get their revenge. There's a fun, silly, stylish tale in each one of those prompts. Next up, we're going to get back to deeper and more serious revenge stories, that of the redemption arc. In revenge redemption arcs, the main character often starts out as the villain. Their vengeance campaign is doing what we warned about earlier. It's gone too far for too long, and they've fallen onto the wrong side of it. The pain and suffering that they've endured, they're now passing on to other people that have nothing to do with them. These are tricky to write, narratively speaking, because you're needing to establish a revenge principle for the villain that is justified, but the actions that the audience can't justify. Magneto was a mutant during the Holocaust. It's understandable that he's seen the worst of humanity and wants revenge. By that same token, judging all of humanity inferior and equally capable of evil is painting with the exact same broad brush that those he reviled did. That's why his character works so well. He's always on the cusp of being right, but he keeps making bad choices down a road the audience can't follow. The redemption arc takes advantage of this as the hero or circumstance forces them to reconcile with their past and recover the humanity they've lost along the way. There are plenty of characters in the hero's journey stories that follow this trope. Magneto, Prince Zuko from Avatar, Darth Vader, and so on. But look at what happens when we shift the focus to the protagonist. Then you get films like Unforgiven and American History X. These are lauded dramas with tons of layers to them. The Unforgiven is about a man that thought he had atoned for his old and violent ways. In almost a reversal of a redemption arc, William Money becomes a kind of hero by turning back into the monster. The story is anything but black and white, good guys and bad guys. American History X is about a supremacist that gave into hate for so long that becoming a better person and reforming himself to save his brother is actually way harder and more painful than staying the way he is. That's wild and deep, and the message between these two films couldn't be further apart. The Unforgiven, as the title implies, is about whether we can ever be free of our worst impulses. And American History X is a tragedy about the cost of doing the right thing after you've done so much wrong. Here are some prompts that I hope will let you dig deeper and unearth great stories. A legendary warrior has burned down every village that is a part of the cult that killed his family, until he realizes that their religion is spreading because of him. A hacker is releasing the most buried details of shareholders for the mega corporation that wronged him, but his bodies start piling up. Is anonymity a shield or a prison? Awakened after 100 years, a group of elves find that they're the last of their kind. Do they seek revenge on a world that destroyed them, or start over? These kind of revenge stories are always layered, morally gray, and multifaceted. You can do so much with dozens of different messaging built into these stories. We come to our last revenge story type today, and that's misguided revenge. This is the ultimate in plot twists and reframing the narrative in revenge stories. We do this because we like revenge and we like twists. We can't have one without the other, though. The The revenge story has to be good and compelling on its own. The twist only adds layers and reframes the narrative. Go back and watch my video on the art of the plot twist if you want to get deeper into that. But the point is that a good twist does not make a good story. A good story becomes a great story when there's a good plot twist. These revenge stories are often, again, riding that line between what is justified and what is unacceptable. The twist will often show us that the revenge wasn't justified at all. The protagonist was wrong. Perhaps they're an unreliable narrator, or perhaps they didn't know any better. Our protagonist in Shutter Island used the idea of revenge as a coping mechanism to keep him from accepting the truth. In The Butterfly Effect, our main character kept trying to change the traumatic past he and his friends endured, but each time he only made things worse. In the movie Frailty, our protagonist recounts the trauma he grew up with, living in a house where his father killed people he believed were demons, but the story isn't really a confession at all. Again, the messaging of these films are pretty far apart. Shutter Island is about trauma and reconciling the truth in a horrible situation. The Butterfly Effect is quite cynical, that the wrong done in our past aren't meant to be fixed, that even the very desire to do so is the only thing that needs to be erased. Frailty is morally ambiguous and primarily about generational trauma. Obviously, I'm also going to give the obvious nod here to the film Memento, which probably marks the 100th time being mentioned on this channel. It's a top 10 film of all time. You need to see it if you haven't already. Twists, revenge, unreliable narrators, and I'm just telling you what happens in the first 5 minutes. So when we craft stories like these, we're kinda pulling double duty. 3/4 of the story is going to be your typical revenge plot, or your mystery driven by revenge. But the other quarter of the story is the story you were hiding from the audience. That has to deliver too. So if you're up to the challenge, here are some prompts. Our hero will rest at nothing to destroy the biotech CEO that erased his memory and his life. He has no clue that they're the same person. The shapeshifters that killed his family are almost wiped from the earth. If only he knew he was a sleeper agent himself. The boy grew up to slay the witch that took his sister. What he never knew was that he's trapped in a time loop, and the witch is his sister. These stories are mighty twisty. You immediately know from the beats of the first example. You could probably draw a straight line to like Total Recall. It's the most obvious comparison. But maybe it means something different to you, and that's what we want to explore. As I mentioned last video, a dozen people can write using something from these prompts and have a dozen different stories to tell, each with their own voice, messaging, and life experience flavoring all of it. Prompts let you express yourself while keeping you honest and adhering to a backbone for your story. That's why they work so well. So please, help yourself. I made enough for the whole class. Join me next week for part 3. We're going to get into some cyberpunk, dystopias, and post-apocalyptic narratives. You know, the cheery stuff. I don't think I've ever met somebody who doesn't like a good revenge story. When my father decided to try his hand at becoming an author, the first book he wrote was a revenge story. There's something visceral about delivering justice to those that have wronged us. There is also something poetic and spiritual about forgiveness and letting go. Revenge covers the whole gamut from top to bottom. Don't forget to check out my new website, the link's in the description below. You'll also find a link to my newsletter in the comments where you can get a free book, read about all my latest projects, and find other indie authors for your next great read. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear about new videos, and until then, have fun and get crafting.